Okay, thank you, everybody. We are back in session. We had technical difficulties. We may continue to have technical difficulties. We believe we have a fix.
Yes.
Should anybody complain in the future? Because the problem is the YouTube link. So when we had to shut down, we had to close the YouTube link. So I'm hoping that all of your supporters have linked onto the new link. So we're going to move forward and we're going to take our chances, conduct ourselves in open session and do our best. So thank you again for your patience. So with that,
Chair.
we are on.
Chair, sorry. Chair.
Yes, yes.
Having you said that, thank you, Chair. I think we should strike from the next meeting minutes any cowardly, degenerate foolishness from these people. I mean, that's just crazy. But thank you for saying that, Chair.
Okay.
I think this is like the third time this happened, so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So with that, Jason, let's complete item C2. I think we have closed the public comments and there has been no further questions. So board members, do I have a motion?
Yes, I make a motion to approve staff recommendation and Jason will also clarify some information that I requested
Okay,
earlier.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments, Jason.
Thank you.
A motion has been moved and seconded to approve staff's recommendation on item C2. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Jason, and Clayton Kubo looks like he's logged up, but thank you. And thank you, Board Member Ono. You are always very prepared and you always ask very good questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to now move on to item D2. This is land division. It is the issuance of a direct lease to Hui o Hauula Hawaii Nonprofit Corporation for community services and activities purposes at Ko'olaulua. Thank you so much. Okay. Hey, Patty, how are you? Nice to see you. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, board members. I'm Patty Miyashiro, land agent with the Land Division Oahu District Office. I'm here to present and answer any questions you folks may have on item D2 for the issuance of a direct lease to the Hui o Hauula for community services and activities purposes. As you may recall, sometime a few years ago, we had come to the board to ask authorization to issue a 3-year lease so that the organization can do their due diligence and to complete the environmental assessment, which they have done, and it's been posted in the July 23rd, 2024 environmental notice. They have continued to fundraise to try to get the funding to complete their plans and get up to hopefully obtain the building permits. They're not quite there yet. They've come and asked if they could get a longer term lease because they're not ready to build. So we also have in the audience the executive director of the organization, Auntie Dottie, and then Senator Brenton Awa.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Patty.
And they,
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Patty before we take?
I have just one. So what is the expiration date that we're looking at? I had 3 different dates.
okay, so the current, sorry, the current one is scheduled to expire next year.
Yeah, 26.
So we're looking at
10 years from
10
there?
years from then, yeah.
Okay, so 36. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Dottie, would you like to come up?
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm Dottie Kelly Paddock. And I'm the executive director of Hui o Hauula. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We are dedicated as a community-based nonprofit to provide support to our communities of Ko'olaulua. All of the communities are involved in our program. We currently have a lease also on the Satellite City Hall in Hauula, where we have created a partnership hub with 30 other nonprofits in addition to ours. And we provide all kinds of services from birth to Kapuna. And early childhood programs, after-school programs, healthy living programs. We have a health and wellness center there, an MD on site, and nutritionists, Kapuna navigators that help them age in place in the community. So we have lots of things and we're very proud of it. And also, we are right in the flood and tsunami zone. And so our concern for many years has been one road in, one road out, and looking at natural disasters in the future. So we are very focused on trying to find a building or build a building that will be a safe building, a safe room according to FEMA standards and ICC 500 that will protect people from up to hurricanes up to Category 5. And so this property is so perfect for us. It enables us to have space out of the flood tsunami zone for people. And in the meantime, we're also going to be growing agroforestry there for food security for our communities. What we would really like to ask the board in this case of this new lease opportunity is because we are working on getting a lot of funding in, we're working on HUD funding right now. We got a $5.5 million earmark CPF funding, and we're getting ready this summer to launch that funding, and it's going to start out with creating traditional Hawaiian holly on the land, as well as the agroforestry and a medicinal garden. So we're convening all of our Native Hawaiian organizations and groups to plan that process. The Native Hawaiian holly is already permitted by DPP, so we can go ahead with that structure on the land, and we're excited about that. Our final design and permitting will be finished next year sometime, and we plan to start construction as soon as possible with additional HUD funding. With all the disruption in Washington, we have just lost our 25-year mark, which was another $5.5 million, but we've applied for a 26-year mark. And so we're hopeful that we can get that and continue the construction. So, but a long-term lease is really critical when we come to working with funders. They look at you only have 1 year right now. And so I would like to make a special request that when this lease is drafted and completed, signed, sealed, and delivered, that we cancel the current lease. So we don't wait a whole year to start this new 10-year lease. Because now is a very critical time for us to be able to say to funders, we have a long-term lease, a 10-year lease. And they look at that as part of deciding whether or not they're actually going to provide the funding. So this is something that we've talked about, and I think it's something that's really critical for us to continue.
Maybe Patty, can you clarify that? Because this is, it's a direct lease, they're a nonprofit.
Correct.
They have a short-term lease, a 3-year lease right now. Is it necessary to cancel the 3-year lease to extend it? Because they can go up to, what is it?
Well, I believe when we checked the HRS 17143.1 does not mention any lease extensions. That's why we're coming to the board to issue a new lease. What Auntie Dottie is saying is that and when she submits her applications, she wants to be able to show these organizations she has a longer term rather than just 1 year. So that's why she wanted to ask the board if you folks would consider canceling the current lease, which only has 1 year left. And we, like a mutual cancellation, and we immediately issue the new one.
Do you need a longer term lease than 10 years? I mean, I'm sure a lot of funding.
Well, yes, I mean, that would be wonderful because, I mean, we're going to keep going through this process. You know, it's probably, realistically speaking, we've got a big building to build. It takes 3 or 4 years to put that all together. And so I would say, yes, a eventually we hope to have, I think we talked about a 65-year lease. And so I'll be coming to see you again and again to get that far, as long as I live.
I think the thought was we issued a 10-year because they're not ready to build
Hmm.
and to start leading into that 65-year lease period.
But if you seek private funding, won't they want a longer term lease?
They do want a longer term.
Like a 25-year lease?
Yes, and we had applied for an EPA community
Yeah.
change grant. And they were very clear in there, you can't get this unless you have a long-term lease.
And what do they consider long-term? Did
Well,
they
I
tell
think
you?
they're looking at what a state agency would provide, because states are different from state to state. And you've even changed that long-term lease within your own board time. So I think the longest lease you can give, I think, is 65 years.
Okay. All right.
Chair, I have a question for the Colin AG at this point. What's being asked and contemplated currently in testimony, does that in any way, is that in any way incongruous with the board submittal and recommendation?
I'm sorry, could you ask your question again? KV, I
I'm
missed the
sorry.
beginning. What is the what?
He's asking if we can issue a longer term lease.
Oh,
for 10
issue.
years.
Yeah.
Longer than 10.
For terms of the agenda, that doesn't make a difference.
Okay.
It's only what's on the agenda proper. Testimony won't affect the agenda.
Okay, well, let me re-ask the question, Colin.
Sure.
While I think that the board would be supportive in a longer term disposition, my concern right now is the ask that's, well, what the board can actually opine on today is just what is in the recommendation. Is that correct?
No, not, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Colin. You want to answer?
I believe so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the agenda item is properly it just says issuance of a direct lease. It doesn't say a 10-year lease. I think we have amended board recommendations and made we've issued, amended those recommendations. So I think the title is correct.
Okay.
It does provide us flexibility, and I do believe we can issue a longer term lease if the board so desires.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just don't want to get hung up on that, because I think, like I said, I think we all would support a longer term lease given the instability of what's going on in Washington, and our nonprofits here need longer term dispositions in order to secure adequate funding. So I'm all for it. I just don't want to get challenged by those that want to challenge us on this.
So Dottie, you mentioned you have a federal funding. Are you being impacted by any of the federal funding freeze other than you said you had a HUD for 2025, 5 million?
We've just been told it was part of Senator Schatz and Hirono's agenda to give us an additional 5.5 million next year. And I mean, this year, 25,
Yeah.
but with the new administration, that's been canceled.
Okay.
And so we're not planning on that. We have applied for a 26. And I think it seems like Senator Schatz's office feels more confident in that.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
So what's worst case scenario come 2026 that it falls through?
Well, we will still have money from this. The HUD funding is good for 8 years. And so we will still have some funding to start the horizontal infrastructure in 26.
Horizontal infrastructure.
Right.
So-
That would be water, electric,
Okay,
and sewage,
okay.
wastewater. Thank you.
Board
I have
members,
another
any other-
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
So when you refer to traditional Hawaiian hale, are you Auntie, are you contemplating like pili grass, like pre-contact Hawaiian?
Yes.
Okay. I only
The-
bring
the-
this up. Go ahead, sorry.
There is a hale already permitted and people certified to build that holly. And so we had intended to use that holly for that, for one of those reasons, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. The only reason why I bring it up, Auntie, is because I'm guessing since it was permitted, it has an adequate sprinkler system and all of that.
That
Okay.
it will have, yes.
Okay, good. Just reflecting on what had happened in Lahaina and everything, I think safety and public health is
We are
paramount,
planning
so
on bringing in electric and water soon this summer,
perfect. Thank
before
you,
the
Auntie.
holly is built, yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, I had a question. On your structures that you plan on putting in, you mentioned about being in the flood inundation area. And also.
Currently,
yeah,
where we are, yeah.
Where you are right now. So
Right.
now you're,
This will
permits will
bring
move
us
it
out of the
outside of the flood
zone.
area.
Yeah,
Okay.
in the SMA,
And-
and it's on a hillside that goes up to 94 feet.
Okay, and then that will be built hurricane proof.
Yes,
That's the goal. Okay.
it's an ICC 500 meeting FEMA standards.
Being from Kauai.
I understand. We have learned from Kauai and Maui, correct?
Thank you.
We do.
And you do intend that this would be like a resiliency hub, that it would be a place for safe in the event there's a hurricane or some other event, that this will be the safe place, because there's not too many other facilities between Kahuku and. I'm not
There's
even-
nothing.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what's next. Maybe it's King
in
Intermediate.
Kaneohe, yeah, it's
Yeah,
Kaneohe,
Kaneohe,
yeah.
King Intermediate. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
other than that, this may be it, right? Okay,
It is it.
yeah, so
Yes.
this will be a critical facility
It is
for
a
the
critical
community.
facility, yes,
No, thank you for your good work. I know you've been working on this for a very long time.
yes. Over
Okay,
10 years.
Oh. Board members, any other questions? I know we do have members of the public. Yeah.
Just, not really a question, but I am good to see you. Just to reiterate the chair's words about all the hard work. I know you guys have been working on this for so long, and it's exciting to be at this stage to get to be discussing this. I do think, just speaking for myself, definitely am interested in thinking about how we can maybe give you a longer term lease. Because I think that will be important for the funding piece, which I know is especially challenging in the current climate. And then just a personal offer when you guys are starting to build Hale or do whatever you're doing. We'd love to come out and help. So
Well,
Thank you.
Sign her up.
Very much.
Take your contact information down.
Put that in writing.
Put that in writing.
It's recorded.
Got it. Oh, it's recorded.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Auntie, would you like to come up?
Sure.
Yes, come on down. Our long-term Hau'ula community member.
This is Renee Onoyi Moana, who is on our board, and she's our fiscal officer for Huio Ha'ula.
So today I'm here today on two capacities. I also represent the Ko'olauloa Hawaiian Civic Club. And we've been in existence for a number of years. We're the second oldest Hawaiian Civic Club. And we support this initiative and this effort. And we've been involved from the clearing of the land through the whole 10 years. And we really believe that it is essential for our community to save the lives. We have been told numerous times that in a disaster, we're on our own, and we realize that we're a long distance away. We're facing current road erosions every day. And so we want to take the opportunity to use this land that was owned by a Hawaiian family, the Kamaki Aina Ohana. And unfortunately, things happen. And so if we, as part of the community, can use it, it would be, I'm sure a kupuna up there will be smiling that it went to good use. And I'd like to thank you all for your support. And I've been on the board meetings, I've watched the meetings, and I want to just say thank you so much for looking out for the Aina and for our people. Mahalo.
And mahalo for traveling in. I know you had to come in from Hau'ula, probably a little early this morning. Always good to see you guys. Thank you so much. Is there anybody else here that would like to provide a comment on item D2?
Senator.
Yes,
Walker.
Senator, come on up. I'm sorry. Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
Nice to see you.
Chair Chang,
members Kanto, Char, Ono, Barnes, Smith, and Yoon. Thanks for moving us up first off. I gotta run to the issue. It was really nice to hear positive conversation. I don't think, other than, me supporting and saying that they do great work, I have to say much more. But yeah, if you guys could contemplate that extension even more longer than 10 years, that'd be great, because then, we wouldn't have to keep going back over here.
Yeah.
And they have an easier time. That's all I have to
Okay.
say, but thank you guys all.
No, mahalo. You've been very instrumental in working with them as well. So thank you for that good work as well.
Yeah, you guys have a good weekend.
Ahoy ho.
Thank you.
Quickly go. Save.
Cruelty on
Oh, Adam, you can stay then. Yes,
Question.
go ahead.
What's the probability? I'm looking at the annual rental of 480 per year.
That's the lowest we can go
That's the
for
lowest we can
nonprofits.
go other than.
Nonprofit.
Zero.
For now.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
that's our current nonprofit. I'm assuming you can afford the $480 a year?
Yes.
Okay,
Can do.
okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
trying.
We'll pick up pennies from the street.
Oh, and I know you don't have to do that. I'm sure
Thank
there
you,
are
ladies.
many
Thank you so
others
much.
who want to support you. Okay, anybody else on Zoom, Ivalani? Okay, any other, I'm gonna close public comments. Board members, do I have, oh, Russell?
Well, I was just
Your
going to
hand is up.
clarify, just to make sure from Colin that, when board member Yoon asked whether this matter could be considered for maybe early termination, did you consider that, looking at the agenda, whether we would be allowed to, or whether staff would have to come back if the board wanted to start the 10 years early?
It wasn't clear from what he was asking, what testimony he was referring to specifically, whether, I mean.
I think
Fair.
the proposal was to terminate early, to issue the 10-year now.
But he didn't actually ask that, though. So I didn't really answer
yeah.
that question.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm here, so referring to me as in the third person is weird, but yeah, so that's kind of what I was asking, Colin, and thank you, Russell, for clarifying. I just don't want to get hung up on the details because again, I think the appetite of the board is to indeed extend as much as we can. I just don't want to get hung up on procedural issues with the agenda and how it's posted.
Board, do I have a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the staff submittal with the amendment of the lease term being 25 years and with a request to cancel the current and issue a new starting from, I guess that would be today.
Can we do that, Patty? When would that be effective?
Or cancel and reissue such that there is no gap between
right.
the current
Yeah.
and
Right, because I think that's your primary, no
yeah,
gap,
yeah,
yeah,
no gap.
okay,
Second the motion.
Usually it's upon execution.
okay,
And
yeah.
that was the question, Colin, can you do that under the current agenda?
Okay, so is Patty, so it would be, so I think Board Member Barnes, and I think that the board just want to make sure we want to grant a longer term lease, 25 years. Also take into consideration their request to terminate and then issue a new lease, but making sure there's no gap. So as Russell had indicated, it would be approved upon execution. So that's once all the documents are approved and filed, but we're approving the authorizing the department to proceed forward on that. Okay.
Thank you for
Yeah,
that
no, thank
clarification,
you.
Chair.
Thank you. So we want to make sure there's no pukas in this time for you guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Mahalo.
Okay. So
Second for
motion is,
discussion.
okay, do I have a second?
First and second.
Okay, a motion's been moved in second. We're in discussion. Go ahead.
Is 25-year the maximum?
No, I think can they go up to what, 65 years? Or what's been our practice for nonprofits? Or do we have a practice?
I don't know if Russell
Okay, Russell?
or Barry.
Well, let me ask Auntie Dottie, and is 25 years sufficient or you want a longer term lease than that?
I think it would behoove us to have the longest term you can provide, but
That's correct.
25 years,
Yeah, the longest.
yeah, the
Yeah,
longest.
and that's why I'm begging the question. If the financier with a lender or whatever would feel much more comfortable at of course a longer term, right? But that's why Chair was asking is 65 the maximum? And can we, if the board so wanted to do it, contemplate amending member Barnes' motion to 65 or 50 or whatever the board's appetite is.
Russell, do you
Yeah.
have a,
Well, legally, you can do it up to 65. But I think what Patty was saying, they limited it to 10 in this case because they thought they weren't ready to construct yet.
Yeah, well,
And they
yeah.
can go 65.
Okay, so the maximum is 65. I think you're hearing the board. We want to give you a longer term lease. That will, the lease will include today's terms and conditions. Okay. Okay,
I'm amenable to amending my motion to 65.
okay,
Vernon's willing to second that.
yeah,
Okay.
okay. So we're in discussion. Go ahead, Riley.
So, I mean, just my feedback, if we're talking about a term that long, which I would support. For this type of lease, would we typically also include a removal bond? Since something's gonna be built up there a long time, that there might be some issues in 65 years that we might be concerned with, so.
Yeah.
We've been throwing them into every other lease, so.
Right, no, I think so what the board's new where the practice has been that we do require in leases, including to nonprofits, a removal bond. So that at the end of the lease term, you are responsible. The board makes a determination, but if the board asks, their determination is they want you to remove the structures and you're required to remove those. In order to ensure that, it's like an insurance policy.
I see.
So that you acquire, and perhaps buying it at this point in time would be rather cheap, right? If it's 65 years.
And I think I'd be flexible, or I'd be comfortable if we said.
At
Maybe like
year-
in 20
years,
years,
yeah.
provide a
Yes.
bond, so get through,
Right.
build your construction, but we just need coverage on the
Yeah,
back.
no,
end.
no, that's a good point. And we've been doing that, right? Right.
I don't
right.
think so, but those
Oh.
are more commercial type. This
Yeah.
is more, I think, in a residential type
Yeah.
community, it's gonna be probably wood frame and maybe one story structure.
No, it's a
No, it's not.
three-story
Oh, three.
structure.
Okay.
And it's also very,
Hurricane proof.
it's
Well,
so,
wood frame or metal?
Resilient built. Our architect is one of the foremost architects in the world for resilient design and building. And Plus Labs out of New York. And we were connected with them when we participated in the OLA planning process because the Rockefeller Foundation brought in a lot of consultants. And one of the consultants was talking about resilience hubs and recommended this particular architectural firm. And they worked with us pro bono for 5 years.
Wow.
And since we got the funding to go ahead with the EA and design, they've been doing that.
Tell them they're not gonna have to build a building for 65 years.
Well, he
Last
tells me,
65
he
years.
tells me, Ilya Azarov tells me that this is 100-year,
Oh,
100-year
okay.
building. And so as many Hawaiians have taught me, we are looking ahead 7 generations with this building.
Very good. Okay.
Chair,
You
can I-
know, Auntie, there are Hawaiian architects that actually studied in traditional structures.
You
know, some of these are-
about yourself.
What firm do you work for now? What firm?
Some of these Hawaiian architects wear pink shirts and glasses and
We use
they
G7.
sit on the
We use
board.
G7.
No. Kaivi, what firm do you work for so they can consider?
I am not going to, I was just,
Okay, I'm sorry.
Can I
Amy.
ask, Colin, can we do what Riley suggested where we could have the removal bond requirement kick in at some point, whether that's 10, 15, 20 years, once the building has been constructed, or
I think it would be a special term, so if whoever makes that motion could include that, that would probably work out a lot better. Because otherwise the usual standard terms and conditions are we would impose the removal bond upon the issuance of the lease, so,
Okay.
yeah.
And they're under the recommendation, so it's A, standard terms and conditions, review and approval by the AG, and such other terms and conditions as may be prescribed by the chairperson to best serve the interest. So either you could make the request now, or since we are moving more into the removal bond, we are including that in our document. So either
I'd be
way,
comfortable requiring it 20 years from now.
okay, okay. And the record, our minutes are going to so reflect that, and we can include that as a special condition. Okay,
Okay, I'm good with
Motion
that.
and then-
yeah, motion and seconded. Right, Vernon? Do you-
Yes.
Okay, accepted. So a motion has been moved and seconded with amendments of 65 years and to include as a special condition, a removal bond to kick in at some point in the future, consistent with some of our other leases that we're moving in that direction. Okay, with that being said, I'm gonna call for the decision. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Mahalo, mahalo. So you walked away with a little bit more than you came here asking.
More. Thank you very much. This is so very helpful. You know, I've worked with many different administrations along the way and having to teach each one about what we're doing. And so this will be very, very helpful. Thank you.
You won't have to teach another board for quite some time. You did a very good job.
Thank
You
you.
taught us well. You taught us well. You
Okay.
taught us
I
well.
would hope though, as the building becomes more, you know, building is put up, that you will come back and tell us about
We would
all the
love
things
to.
that you've done.
We would love to. When we created this plan, this vision, we plan, and we're featured in the OLA plan as the first model resilience hub on the island of Oahu. And we are always documenting every step we took along the way so that we can help share that Ike with other small vulnerable communities across our state. It's
That's
very
great.
important to do that.
Mahalo for that. I
Yeah.
think that's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Auntie, if you need Member Barnes's personal cell phone number, let me know.
We
And
want
please-
yours too.
Please take pictures of her on site because, we need to ensure that she's working hard.
I have poly building experience. I got pictures on my phone. I'll show you. So.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thank
Okay. I'm going to
Thank
take
you.
a 5-minute break and then we're going to move on to item F1 and F2. Okay, Brian? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We're back in session. We're going to move on to item F1. Brian?
Aloha Chair, Board Members, Brian Nielsen, Administrator for Division of Aquatic Resources, also joined by Kathy Gay-Wicki, Aquatic Biologist with Division of Aquatic Resources. I believe Luna Keikoa was also going to join on the Zoom as well for support, but yeah, I'll hand it over to Kathy.
Okay. Good morning, Kathy.
Good morning. Aloha Chair Chang and members of the board. My name is Kathy Gay-Wicki. I'm a aquatic biologist with Division of Aquatic Resources, and today I'll be presenting item F1 and F2. We'll start with F1. F1 is a request for authorization and approval to issue a Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument Research Permit to Keo Lohilani Lopes Jr., Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Management at University of Hawaii at Manoa for access to state waters to conduct activities for monitoring a red nuisance algae, Chondria tumulosa, for a research project at Manawai and Lalo. This item is a new permit request. Two different types of small uncrewed marine systems called SUMS, including a floaty bot, a surface vehicle, and a ranger bot, a submersible. Both SUMS are also referred to as Chondria bots. And an automated underwater covert camera and hydrophone are being requested by the researcher to be deployed to survey Chondria distribution or collect related data. The bots will autonomously map this invasive acting macroalgae, Chondria, and collect images and data. These cameras will conduct presence absence videos of marine species and how they relate to the soundscape and disturbances. The passive hydrophone and camera will be used to compare the soundscapes between areas with Chondria and areas without. This project is important because identifying and mapping Chondria is a major gap in knowledge for the monument resource managers. And the Chondria bot program aims to fill this gap. Currently, there's very sparse spatial data for the extent of Chondria, and this project hopes to start filling in that data gap with the information they collect. These bots have been developed by Queensland University of Technology and adapted for this specific purpose in collaboration with the University of Hawaii. DAR needs to make one amendment to this DONR submittal. A regular part of the monument review process is for the cultural working group to conduct a review of each project. This year, a review was not able to be conducted, but DAR has sent both of these permits to Ahamoku for review. And the applicant, KO, is here today to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. I knew one of you guys was Kale.
And I forgot to introduce Jesse Board, our aquatic invasive species biologist, is also available on the Zoom. And then I see Luna Keikoa, DAR's program manager, is also. Luna, did you want to say anything about Kapa'akai or the cultural review process for both F1 and F2?
Sure. So because the Ahamoku is the advisory for DLNR, we did reach out to Auntie Leimana and Uncle Charlie with both of the submittals. As far as the cultural working group, so that's part of the Marine Monument Management Board. And so OHA is the liaison to that group. And so we've been in contact with OHA, and they're working their relationship with the cultural working group on some of those issues over there. And so we haven't heard back from that cultural working group, but we did check in with Ahamoku.
And what were the results of Ahamoku?
Uncle Charlie was supportive of the proposals.
Okay.
So I think to this, hey, how's it, Luna? So to this point, you know, when I read through the submittal, the questions, and then, you know, I'm thankful that we're gonna do Oli and all of that. That's great. But I think one of the points I was trying to make when this Papahanaumokuakea comes up is how that interplay between culture and science is being solidified and supported. You know, and I would imagine, like, any removal or eradication of non-native or invasive species, how does that positively impact adjacent or other native species as a result of our efforts, right? I mean, I think that's a scientific way of looking at, why we're doing this said action and how that benefits our native environment. I think that's a compelling story to make and to tell, much more than, yes, the necessary OLI and protocols that we do, which again is very important. But I hope that we can start to take a little different lens at that interplay, because I think it's very interesting and I think it's worthwhile for our Kiki. Thank you, Luna.
Maybe Keo might be able to address some of that. Okay. The applicant is here.
I'd like to thank the board for having me here today and call me KO is fine. And, thank you guys for your
Do you prefer another?
comments. KO is.
Keo,
KO is.
okay.
I grew up pre Renaissance and people had trouble with my name growing up. And I'd like to just comment as a Native Hawaiian researcher, Native Hawaiian first and entering this research space. It's very interesting that you bring up Member Yoon on how we approach Western science as it relates to our Native voices and goals. When I look to any of my projects, my main goal is preservation, preservation for future generations. And currently, there's some threat with this invasive algae, as well as marine debris that's constantly threatening the monument, which is a very sacred place. I've been there many times, and it's always moving, and I always come back different, and I'd like to preserve this place in whatever way I can. I'm ready to answer your question.
Appreciate that. I think it's very important for us to understand from the applicant the lens upon which you're looking at your research, as well as the perspective that you take for it. So thank you for sharing that. All right, board members.
Yeah, I just have
yes.
a quick
Go ahead.
question. So what are your thoughts on Elon Musk using the area or surrounding areas for his quirky projects?
I have some personal opinions on that matter. However, that decision rests entirely with the MMB and how they want to navigate this current.
But wouldn't it harm our waters? I'm
There-
sure, right?
There's a lot of potential for catastrophic damage. I'm sure we can all imagine scenarios where these rockets would come down in our sacred places.
Thank you. You're being very cautious. Thank you.
He's actually being very kind.
And kind.
I'm sure he's not telling us what he would
Yeah.
like to share.
You're so kind.
Yeah, it's not totally a
Meet you
safe
at the bar.
space. We're on YouTube. We're on
Did you hear
YouTube. And you saw we just got bombed.
Yes.
So other people are listening to what we say. So no, totally appreciate.
Thank you.
that. Okay. Board members, any other questions for Kale?
Just mahalo for your work.
All right. With no other questions, has there been anybody else on Zoom that would like to make a comment? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close public comments. Board members, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion has been moved and seconded to approve item F1 as submitted. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Okay.
And
Mahalo.
remove that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you again. Okay, F2.
So now we'll move on to item F2. This is still Kathy Gatewicki with Division of Aquatic Resources. This is a request for authorization and approval to issue a Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument Conservation and Management Permit to Mr. James Morioka, of the Papahanaumokuakea Marine Debris Project Incorporated, a Hawaii nonprofit corporation, PMDP for short, for access to state waters to survey and remove marine debris and disentangle marine life as needed within the waters of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. Item F2 is a permit renewal request for PMDP to conduct large-scale marine debris removal operations and disentangle marine life as needed in the monument. Previous permits were issued in 2022, 2023, and 2024. Large-scale marine debris removal operations in the monument are necessary for the protection and safety of marine wildlife, including monk seals, turtles, seabirds, and coral reef habitat. This permit for PMDP would authorize 3 separate missions this year between April and October to conduct these marine debris operations, including 1 flight to Midway in April and 2 cruises to all of the islands between August and October. These expedition dates may vary if unforeseen interruptions or delays occur. There's a separate permit, PMNM 2025-005, which will cover any fundraising related to images collected of activities conducted under this permit. So the project staff will focus on the following: conducting surveys and removing derelict fishing gear, plastics, and other entanglement hazards from coral reef and shoreline environments, assessing the rates of accumulation, abundance, and distribution, and ecological impacts of marine debris on coral reefs and shorelines through surveys, and disentangling protected wildlife, including monk seals, turtles, and seabirds. New modifications or activities for the 2025 permit application include the following: collecting both in-water and shoreline debris at Kuaheilani. And PMDP anticipates removing approximately 200,000 pounds or 100 tons of marine debris removed from the monument over the 3 expeditions. The project will follow biosecurity protocols outlined in BMP 20 to minimize the spread of the invasive algae Chondria tumulosa, and in addition to supplemental biosecurity plans when conducting operations at the atolls that have this algae. DAR needs to make the 2 following amendments to this BLNR submittal. On page 8 of the BLNR submittal, it states that for activities related to the nuisance algae Chondria at Kuaheilani, Manawai, and Hulaniku, BMP requires a biosecurity plan, which is currently under review. Instead of having 1 plan, the biosecurity plan for this project has been split into 3 parts, 1 plan per mission, and in order to not hold up a mission if 1 plan is still under review. The second amendment is that the same as the other project, a regular part of the monument review process is for the culture working group to conduct review of each project. And this year, a review was not able to be conducted, but DAR has sent both of these this permit as well to the Ahamoku for review. James Morioka, one of PMDP's co-founders, is here today to answer any additional questions you may have.
Luna, did you want to add anything more before we hear from James regarding the Ahamoku's, the consultation process?
Same thing. Uncle Charlie was good with this one. Had no comments with this one.
Thank you for that.
Taking into consideration what Ewan said about expanding upon just Olean, explaining how removal of invasives helps to free the natives.
Right on. Chair, I had a question for staff, please.
Go ahead.
By the way, Kathy, that was funny. When you opened, you said, "This is still Kathy Gilwicki here." That made me laugh, so thank you, Kathy. Papahanaumokuakea been there, formally codified for about, I want to say 20 years. That's about right. Kathy, has there been a decrease of tonnage of marine debris in the 20 years?
I can speak on that.
Yeah, I would defer to James if that's okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Aloha, Member Yoon. Aloha, Chair Chang, members of the board. My name is James Morioka. I'm the executive director and co-founder of the nonprofit organization Papahanaumokuakea Marine Debris Project. To address Member Yoon's question, we have not seen a decrease of derelict fishing nets on the coral reefs. Over the last 4 years, our organization has removed over 1 million pounds of marine debris, 80% of which was derelict fishing nets. Because of our unique position here in the Hawaiian Islands, being the most isolated archipelago in the world and centrally located in the North Pacific Ocean, we are affected negatively, uniquely by the commercial fishing industry. And so a lot of the marine debris that arrives on our shorelines and on our reefs have to spend a lot of time out at sea. And by that time, a lot of the domestic plastics have fragmented and have become unidentifiable. But what stands the true test of, I guess, the weathering and the time is the commercial fishing gear, which is made up of high density polyethylene and polypropylene materials, which is a material that's meant to last forever. And so unfortunately, this commercial fishing gear continues to ghost fish, killing a lot of our animals until it sets on the coral. When the fishing nets land on these coral reefs, it tends to suffocate these living corals like a tarp on a grass. And so everything beneath it will end up dying, and it will not be provide shelter or food for fish that are really important to our native food web. Papahanaumokuakea is a place that's incredibly near and dear to my heart. It's got more than 7,000 species of marine wildlife, and a quarter of which are found nowhere else in the world. And so as a father, I have a daughter who's a native Hawaiian. It's my responsibility to really show that I'm gonna, stand up to the issues that we are facing here in Hawaii and to do what I can to protect and preserve for the next generation. And so here at PMDP, we not only focus on large scale marine debris removals, but it's really important for us to be able to provide hands-on training and experience to really foster growth in the next generation of marine conservationists and researchers and stewards. And so we also actively work with the Native Hawaiian Cultural Working Group to ensure that Native Hawaiians are given access to the place. So not only just Oli, Ho'okupu, and Kilo, but also providing them the hands-on experience for them to be able to have a pathway into a real career.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Follow-up question to that. So there hasn't been a decrease in tonnage. That's sad. Is that a product of lack of education on our part, or just blatant disregard by commercial fishermen?
I think it's partially education, and I think it's also policy and enforcement. When you talk about marine debris or derelict fishing nets in international waters in the North Pacific Ocean, it's really hard to regulate. We're talking about an increase of plastic production. So these derelict fishing nets have become so overwhelmingly cheap that it's often cheaper to get a brand new net than to repair a broken net. I understand that these fishermen are not trying to lose their gear, but if they're responsible for having broken gear, taking it to port, transporting it, and paying for disposal fees, I think a lot of people think it's the open ocean, it's out of sight, out of mind. What we find is primarily fishing gear from the trawl and purse seine fishing industries. Almost none come from Hawaii's fisheries, the longline fishing industry. So what we're recovering is fishing gear from various vessels in the North Pacific Ocean. And I think there's just a lack of education. So we do not understand why these fishermen are disposing of their gear or getting rid of their gear. And I don't think that a lot of these Pacific islands or Pacific countries are recognizing the damage it's doing to us here in Hawaii, being so close to the Great Pacific Garbage Patches and the subtropical convergence zones.
Isn't Papahanaumokuakea a World Heritage Site?
It is. It is the UNESCO World Heritage Site, the only one recognized for both its natural resources and the culture. It also recently became.
So with that designation, I would imagine that we could, I don't know, increase the penalties for bad actors, or prevent rocket shrapnel from going into a World Heritage Site. I mean, everything from fish nets to rocket shrapnel. I mean, it's just, I'm confused and vexed as how a World Heritage Site could be ignored at this level.
Yes, absolutely. And recently it was also designated National Marine Sanctuaries by NOAA on January 16th. It got final approval on March 3rd. So that offers another layer of protection of these sacred islands without having to expand the area. Being a UNESCO World Heritage Site, I understand that we have representation at the UN level. I previously spent 10 years with the NOAA Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center, working on coral reef research, Hawaiian monk seal biology, but also leading this project to remove marine debris from these very sacred places. We continue to provide our data to NOAA and with the hopes that there will be some kind of policy change with enforcement. However, it's truly an incredible place. It's so isolated that it's really, really hard to regulate. You're talking about 1,200 miles away, with the nearest access being Midway Atoll by flight. But a Coast Guard helicopter or these ships, it would take tremendous amount of resources to monitor these places.
It might be easier you monitor them at the ports. You inventory what goes out and you inventory what comes in. If it doesn't come in, it's left someplace. So because you're right, it is impossible to enforce and monitor just the scope of the ocean. But if we can have better enforcement at the ports, again, in my mind, that's a low-hanging fruit. You know where they're
Chair,
coming from and you can
Yeah,
monitor.
Chair, that's a great idea, Chair. Is there any way that the board and or DLNR can?
Those are federal jurisdictions. Those are probably not within our own countries. That's probably something more with international law, the law of the sea.
I wasn't, if I could finish, if the board or the DLNR could write a letter to encourage our congressional delegation to advocate for that idea that you just brought up, or other ideas, because it's I would expect over 20 years for a World Heritage Site that the tonnage would decrease, even by 1% or 5%, whatever it is, but that's not happening. So that's problematic. Thanks, Chair.
Question for you. Yes, thank you for your report. I really like it. How are you able to identify where this debris is coming from and who it belongs to? How can you make that determination? How are you doing that?
To identify the source of the fishing vessel in the fishery is incredibly difficult. It's almost like forensics. And so by the time that these nets arrive on our coral reefs, they become these conglomerates of very many different fishing net types. And so they're often primarily trawl and purse seine, but they may be mixed with 3-4 different types of fishing nets. When we recover them, we turn them over to the Hawaii Pacific University Center for Marine Debris Research, and they're able to actually sort these nets and try and source them back to its origin. Unfortunately, you can pretty much only find where these nets were manufactured. You do not know where these nets were used or what country used them or what fishing vessel used them. There's been studies since the early 90s through the NOAA fisheries trying to source it back to the fishing vessel. It's just been incredibly important to have enforcement, like weighing gear in and out of port, I think is one thing that should be conducted. Also lost gear, if there's incentivizing return gear, I think that would be another purpose or another way to increase the amount of marine debris removed, but also decrease the amount of gear lost. Folks have also talked about barcoding inside of these fishing nets, so then each fishing net would have to be registered to a fishing vessel. But it's really, really hard to regulate. You would need buy-in at the United Nations level.
Okay, thank you.
James, can I ask you your protocol for the removal of the invasive seaweed?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
explain that.
In years past, we have not removed any fishing nets near this invasive species of the seaweed, Chondria tumulosa. And so our team is professionally trained. We go through rigorous training through the NOAA fisheries to identify this algae. But if we identify algae on the net or the surrounding habitat, we have to move to an alternative location. And so we leave the net in place. Unfortunately, last year we disentangled and rescued 2 green sea turtles and had to leave the net in place. And so I think one of my biggest concerns is that these nets are going to continue to trap animals and to kill animals. It's going to continue to disrupt the coral reef ecosystem, kill the coral beneath it, but it also serves as a vector for spread. And so once these fishing nets will become loose from the reef, they become these floating masses of these invasive algae, which can then get sucked into the current back to the convergence zones and bring it back to the main Hawaiian Islands. We have a rigorous biosecurity plan to ensure that this algae does not come back to our reef. So one is we eliminate it at the first step, which is if we can identify, we have to leave it in place. All the nets that come from these islands, which are infected by this algae, we are removing it, and then we are putting them into marine debris storage bins, and we have to bleach them at a 10% solution for 4 hours, because that's the only known science known to kill this algae. Once the nets are treated, that there's absolutely no chance of this algae surviving it, then we have to neutralize and dilute this bleach solution, go 3 nautical miles offshore, over 10,000 or over 1,000 fathoms deep, so 6,000 feet of water, and we're able to discharge the water overboard into Papahanaumokuakea, assuming that it's neutralized, and also that once it hits the big deep ocean, it kind of dissipates and dilutes into nothing. But this method is extremely caustic and toxic for our staff. It's been really, really difficult to work with, but this is what we have to do to ensure and safeguard the main Hawaiian Islands, and so we're going to continue to do so. This year at Kuahilani, our first mission in April, we're proposing to remove fishing nets for the first time with this Chondria tumelosa on there. All the nets will be left on Kuahilani, so will not return to the main Hawaiian Islands, and will be either studied for more research to identify ways to kill it, or it would have to be treated with bleach solution before it could be brought back to Honolulu. Once the nets are brought back here, everything is craned off whole and trucked directly to H. Power Covanta for direct incineration to ensure that it does not get into our waterways and, conquer the reefs here.
So does incineration kill the algae?
It does, absolutely. It
So
burns it.
is that a more effective tool than the bleaching?
It has to be bleached before
I
it comes
see,
to the
I
main
see.
Hawaiian Islands, and then we incinerate it. So we've thought this process through, and every step of the way, we try to mitigate all of this, the
Who pays
risks.
those additional costs? Do you guys
Pay it all.
fundraise? You
Yeah.
fundraise for that?
Our organization is fortunate enough to get half of our money from the federal government, but half of it comes from private donations and one large philanthropist. And so we're very, very lucky and fortunate to be okay this year, but in the years beyond that, we're unsure. However, we're trying to up our private fundraising game to make sure that this important work happens, not only for the wildlife and the habitat, but for the next generation.
Are you potentially at risk of losing your federal funds?
This year, we seem to be secure. And so the money has left Treasury and has been sent to NOAA, and we are, I guess, working as business as usual. And so
Good to hear.
we're hoping that next year will be the same, but everything is up in the air. Absolutely.
Last year, I'd recommended that you work with the Navy on getting one of their, getting one of their old carriers and putting an H power plant on there
Mhm.
and taking it out to Papahanaumo, so you don't have to bring it back in. I mean, it may be pie in the sky, but that incineration seems to be an effective tool. And that may be a really nice collaboration with USDOD to have them have a floating incinerator that can be much more efficient for you guys rather than hauling it all the way. Because I'm assuming that you end up making so many more trips using so much more gas,
Yes.
so the impacts, but again, just a thought.
Thank you for that, Chair Chang. Yeah, we've been working with Governor Green to
Okay.
potentially build infrastructure on Kuahilani Midway Atoll that can
Mm.
incinerate it there, because it happens to be the island within 3 islands and atolls that have this nuisance algae.
Floating dock might be better.
Yeah.
Or floating ship might be better than exposing, but, okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the thorough explanation. Obviously, you have all put considerable thought to what you're doing. Thank you very much. Riley.
Make a couple comments and ask one question. Thank you, Jane, for being here. A colleague shared the video that your organization put together. I thank you and Kevin O'Brien for everything that you guys are doing. I think when you came and talked to us last year, I think we all identified that there's so much logistics involved and you got to travel so far. And then as soon as the ship is full, you got to bring it back. It's kind of like a transfer station truck that is full with rubbish and goes back to H Power or whatever, and then you want to make another return trip. But I mean, the distance, the logistics of getting to where you need and picking up everything is so complex. So thanks for doing what you're doing. Hopefully you can find these economies of scale so that you can be more productive. In the video, I observed how much handwork is involved. I mean, you guys are in Zodiacs, you're pulling the nets off the reef. So much physical labor that you and your crew, you guys are all doing it yourselves. So, and this is primarily private sector funding aside from the federal government. So I appreciate the amount of resources that are coming into our state to employ our residents, to improve our oceans and resources here. So thank you for continuing to do all that. Can you elaborate a little bit more about Midway and what opportunities there might be so you don't have to bring all that material 1,200 miles or whatever to here?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been working with Governor Josh Green over the last couple of years to try and get funding, which I believe is state funding for infrastructure to either develop an incineration site or a way to turn this marine debris into biofuel. Because if you can turn it into diesel, you can run the generators at Koihilani, and it's a little bit more of a circular system. We have not made headway on it, unfortunately. And so right now we're relying on having to transport it here. But that was our goal, is that Midway can serve as kind of like an H-Power, a mini H-Power in the middle of the Pacific. I think the resources it would require to maintain and run it would be a lot larger than expected. And with such limited staff at Midway Atoll, I think it would prove to be pretty difficult. But I think that, you know, things don't happen without ideas and action and trying to make change. So I really am impressed with how this idea was brought to the table, and hopefully it can carry on.
And then the other thing that kind of impressed me with the video, are you guys using technology? Are you guys using drones so that you don't actually have to go on your boat to figure out where the nets are, but you can use drones to figure out where you should deploy to where's the massive nets and all that. So that, I mean, that was pretty impressive that while you're out there, you're trying to be as efficient as possible and what you focus your actions on. So you want to comment on anything about that?
Thank you. Yes, this project has been around since the 1990s. And so we are fortunate enough to have 25 years of data from NOAA Fisheries. So we know where every single net has accumulated on the reefs. Using that data, we're able to prioritize our survey sites so we know where the hotspots or the debris accumulation zones are. And so we focus on that, and then ensure that wherever there's protected coral or protected species, we ensure that these areas are cleaned annually. What the drone technology is able to do is actually prioritize derelict fishing nets with wildlife entangled in it. And so what it's helped to do is we can put the drone in the sky or the bird in the sky. We may see 4 nets, but we may see the 1 net with turtles that you cannot see from your boat. And so then we can go straight to that site and disentangle these animals, which may only have a couple hours to live. And so we're using drone technologies, which are unmanned aerial vehicles, essentially with multispectral lenses. So we're able to use 4 different sensors to be able to toggle between the sensors to see how the nets pop from the reef. Because once these derelict fishing nets get stuck on the reef, it tends to bioaccumulate and look exactly like the coral reef habitat. And so using your typical red, green, blue lens is really, really difficult to distinguish what is a fishing net and what's not. So we have 3 challenges, basically: detecting it, cutting it, and lifting it. As Member Smith mentioned, all of our work is conducted by hand. We have to use these inflatable Zodiacs because the coral reefs are so shallow that we cannot bring larger vessels with cranes, davits, A-frames to help us power these nets out of the water. And so every net has to be cut up into a little piece. Our team of 4 can typically lift about 500 to 800 pounds, but the biggest net we found was 23,000, so 11.5 tons. It was probably bigger than this room, to fill this room. And so it took our team 16 divers 4 days to cut it up into manageable chunks and to be able to manually load it into our boats and get it out of the water, protect those reefs. And so currently we're working on cutting technologies to be able to improve cutting these nets into smaller chunks. We're going to develop a manual and a powered tool, like an underwater sawzall, reciprocating saw, to be able to cut through that is not threatening to the coral reef ecosystems, but also make it publicly available, the design publicly available for all nonprofits or organizations or agencies to use, because this is an incredibly unique problem that I think we may only suffer where we're not able to use powered winches to get these large net masses out. We're also developing a new large scale heavy net extraction platform, which can then pull these nets whole, because if you don't have to cut, then you can lift it whole. But if you can cut, then you don't really need the lifting technology. So it's a 3-pronged approach. Those are our 3 challenges. And we're continuing to work on our innovative piece to be able to be more operationally efficient.
Very impressive.
I'm good.
Good. Any other
I have
questions?
a follow-up question to that, Chair. Did you say, or did you imply, or maybe I didn't hear you correctly, so I'll ask the question. Is the final disposition of the debris predictable? Meaning you find them on here, here, and here, and that the probability that is pretty high. Is that correct?
So these atolls can be 10 miles wide by 10 miles long. And so our team, it would take more than half the year to be able to survey all of these areas. We're talking about 1,200 square miles of shallow coral reef habitats. And so we're able to prioritize where it enters these atolls, which is typically from the northeast side. That's where it tends to accumulate. And then you'll see that it'll snag on a reef. A bit of it will be left on the reef, but the mass will get ripped off and continue to travel. And it's like a path of destruction. And then once you're into the interior of the atoll, where it's a lot more calm and lake-like conditions, that's where it'll settle. And that's where it's actually most damaging to the wildlife. If it's adhered to the reef and floating at the surface, it becomes a floating ghost net. And so we are able to prioritize those zones a little bit on the interior of the atoll and kind of move to the exterior, knowing that the little chunks may be freed in years following.
I see. I see. So, yeah, sorry. I see. So basically, it's a northeasterly pattern or migration of the debris, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. That's where it
Yeah,
enters.
I know zero about your business, so please excuse me for stupid ideas. But if that is the case, and if there is some probability, and if there is a swath of ocean that would allow it, wouldn't we want to catch it or collect it before it hits the atoll?
Yes, absolutely. So there's an organization called the Ocean Cleanup that is doing cleanup in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and the North Pacific Ocean. As it moves closer to the islands, you can imagine that these islands serve like the teeth on a comb. And so as the currents go through, it also kind of swirls around it. And so it may come in from the northeast, but once it hits the island or atoll, the little currents disperse. So if we're fortunate enough to find it on the inside, from there, it tracks northeast. But the currents that go around the atoll make it really, really difficult to remove. And I get that question a lot, like, why don't we remove it before it impacts the coral reefs? And it would just be a tremendous amount of resources. You're talking about the ship time, the fuel that it takes to be able to sift the open ocean. What we're about is protecting Papahanaumokuakea and the place. We don't love marine debris. We just love the place. We love the people, and we know how important it is, and that's why we're there to protect it. When it comes to protecting Papahanaumokuakea, you have the issue of climate change, with ocean acidification, temperatures warming, sea level rise. Those are all very complex issues that requires buy-in from the global community. What I can do with my skill set is I can put my hands to work and I can go dive and I can remove these fishing nets. And so I know that that's where my skills bode well, and that's what I'm going to continue to do for the future.
Thank you very much.
Underestimate, you know a lot more than that. I mean, it is very clear, but I think more importantly, your experience can really help target, targeted impacts. Where can it make the difference? Have you spoken at the United Nations at all?
I have not, but I would love that opportunity.
I mean, we just met with someone yesterday, Brian, remember, Dr. Wakita. And I think Japan is very interested, in, Papahanaumokuakea. Did you speak to her too? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that may also be a vehicle. The more that we can collaborate with our, I'm careful about using the word allies, but the more we can with our island country, our sister island countries, I suspect that may also be an opportunity. Yeah. Okay. With that being said, is there any other questions for James? Yes.
Hi, James, and just disclosure, I know Kevin O'Brien very well, but knowing Kevin will not influence my vote on this. I don't get any money from knowing Kevin as a friend. I just wanted to sort of reiterate what many other board members have said and commend the work that you guys are doing. It's so impressive. And it's, I know a little bit about it through knowing Kevin, but it's always fun to get to hear you guys come and talk about it here because I learned so much more. And I think that it's such a model of sort of the Hawaiian spirit around these kinds of problems, just like you were saying, what I can do is what I can do and I'm going to do it. So I just really think that it is important for you guys to get out and be telling your story more to people about, how you're doing this work. You talked a little bit about it, but just two things I wanted to ask if you could talk a little bit more about both the job creation and the opportunities that you guys are giving, because that's something that I've observed through your work is just how excited some of the young people in our community get about the opportunity to go out and use their skills on these boats and have a life changing experience of being out in the, out there. And then also, maybe talk a little bit about some of the work that you guys do in schools, helping educate our keiki about some of the issues. I know Kevin came to my kids' school a few months ago, and they really, I think it really impressed upon a lot of them just some of the environmental challenges that we have, climate change and all that. So I think those are two big benefits that you guys are bringing to our community, and we'd love to just give you the opportunity to talk a little bit more about them. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Member Barnes. At the NOAA Pacific Islands Fishery Science Center, when we were able to manage this project, it was our responsibility to bring the place to the people. You know, we still understand that that's a core part of our mission, but here at the nonprofit organization, we actually have the opportunity to bring the people to the place. And so every year we try and hire about 8 new technicians. We are currently in the process of reviewing all of our applications. We got nearly 100 applications for 8 spots. It's extremely competitive, but we do work with our partners at the Cultural Working Group, the Monument Management Board, University of Hawaii Hilo and Manoa, the Pacific Internships Pathways Program, PIPES at UH Hilo, to offer opportunities for local Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, and other local people to be able to be a part of this team. Our job is not meant to be a career job, unfortunately. It's a 2-year job, but we provide a tremendous amount of training and certifications that benefit the youth to be able to transition onto something new. So then they can work with the great people at the state, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, OHA, NOAA, or if they're up for it, creating their own nonprofit organization to be able to protect the rest of Hawaii. So we really heavily invest in local people that are going to stay in Hawaii and protect Hawaii, whether that's the marine side or the terrestrial side. We think that that's very important. You know, we have enough people that want to come back each year that we would save $250,000 by taking the same people over and over. But we really invested in developing the next generation. So we fundraise to ensure that we can train 8 new staff each year. When it comes to outreach and education, that's a component that we're working on. Last year, we spoke to 400 students from K through 12 and the colleges, but we're hoping to expand that. Like, you know, Kevin and I, this was our organization, just the 2 of us up until early January. We've been able to kind of expand our team to 5 people, but we have seasonal employees that get us to about 23 staff. But year round, you're talking about me and Kevin. And so it was a huge lift for us, but we always prioritize schools. So any school that would reach out, we would ensure that Kevin and I would go and speak to the students, make sure that they learn about Papahanaumokuakea, about the cultural side of Hawaii, and then also about the issues of marine debris. And so we are hoping to expand that project and that program to be able to reach more students here locally, because you'd be surprised that not many people really know about Papahanaumokuakea or the issues of marine debris.
You are a great ambassador. You effectively communicate. Do a lot more of the videos. That's also a good way.
Well, you know, one of the things that really interests me is that when you're talking and you present your program, you just presented your program to us, is that you said it's not for me, but it's for the future generations. And I think that our outreach has to be always looking for the future generations, not for us, but your great grandkids, you know, way beyond our timelines. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I was really fortunate enough to have the ocean provide for me, and I just want it to be the same for my children and their children, you know, just trying to protect and preserve.
Thank you very much. I know, is Jesse here? Jesse, did you want to say anything about this matter?
Well, yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Chair. I think if anything, I really can only, I guess I'd like to start by just thanking James and Kevin for everything they've done. I think this, like, to sound like a broken record, we're all excited about what they're doing. We love what they're doing out there. But I guess as the biologist, I'm kind of the one that has some of the concerns with the risk, and that's kind of where this lies. So I don't have anything to add aside from just that we really are kind of hoping to protect the islands from an unwanted chondria introduction. These guys' biosecurity methods are pretty secure, and we have no problems with them. We have one kind of thing that we're dealing with now, but I believe that's it. So aside from that, no. If there's anything specific to Chondria tumelosa, I can speak on that. Otherwise, I have nothing to add aside from we're just doing our best to kind of keep the main islands biosecure with our efforts. Just that we've had a lot of response efforts in the last really half a year that have just kind of stretched our capacity thin. We have Eunomia in Pearl Harbor. We have the anemone as well in Pearl Harbor and Kaneohe Bay. We have invasive algae. So we just have it in our best interest to keep the main Hawaiian Islands biosecure. And that's really all I have to add.
Okay, and thank you, Jesse, and appreciate the good work that you're doing out there as well. Okay, with that being said, I don't see any other.
I have a couple follow-ups, Chair. I'm sorry. To Luna and or Jesse. Has there been any thought, just spitballing here, any thought to give Hawaiian names to invasive species? Like it would be like it would start with Opala, da 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 da. Right. I mean, right? Because I hear you, Jesse, when you refer to it as that. But if we'd call it Opala Limu da da da, some of us Hawaiians might, understand that better than long scientific name. Just a thought. And then before I forget, the idea of catching the Opala as it comes in the nets. I just thought that. What if you gather all that Opala and use the Opala to catch the Opala? Meaning, with that amount of tonnage, right, that you're talking about, which is the size of that room or bigger, would it help to float that northeast and let that catch its own rubbish? Just a thought.
Member Yoon, I can speak on that. I think our responsibility is to carefully remove this rubbish or Opala out of the ocean. I think when you are using either nets or trash to continue to collect, I think there's a lot of biological concerns that I'm not really a professional on, but you're talking about removing fish or larval species or larval stages of species that are going to benefit and prosper in the future generations. And so oftentimes you'll come across a fishing net and you'll see a lot of fish using it as habitat. You'll see the big schooling fish, but once it lands on the reef, they're gone. And so at that point, it's our responsibility to remove it so it doesn't entangle any of our animals. And I think just getting it out of the ocean is our biggest mission.
I see. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair, for the indulgence.
All right, thank you. With that being said, I'll call for the motion.
Chair move to approve staff submittal with the amendment that staff recommended, noting that the biosecurity plan would be in 3 parts
Yeah.
rather than 1. Is that the only amendment?
Yeah, and just the kind of the note about the cultural working group review.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, motion has been moved and seconded to approve staff's recommendation with proposed amendments. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, both of you, very much. Appreciate your time and the great work that you both are doing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you guys so much.
Thank you. All right, we're going to do our last item, which is item D2. D2, D1. D1. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just leave some stickers?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
kids always
We all
love
have grandchildren.
stickers.
Yeah, I got 7 of them. I got 7.
Yeah, you're right, we're kids too.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
thanks.
Your
Hey.
kids or grandkids want outreach and education, please feel.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. Take care now. Ahoy ho. All right, Rebecca, D1.
Yes, good morning, Chair and members of the board. It's been a morning of really tough acts to follow.
You're right.
Rebecca Anderson with Land Division, presenting on item D1. This is a grant of the term non-exclusive easement, immediate right of entry and revocable permit to the Association of Apartment Owners of the Pikake, which is a condominium building on Maui, for portions of a seawall, concrete steps and metal railing and rock revetments at Kanapali, Maui. Some of these portions of the seawall, the concrete steps and the metal railing and rock revetments are encroaching on state shoreline land. So we're asking for an easement disposition to resolve this. The area of encroachment is approximately 425 square feet, and that's of course subject to confirmation by the survey division. We're asking for for a couple of interim dispositions of a right of entry permit and revocable permit, so we can have something in place and charge rent and impose an insurance requirement and a removal bond requirement while the easement disposition is being finalized. This one will require approval of the legislature and the governor. Monthly rent has been calculated at $193, and the removal bond amount has been calculated at $33,941. I've been asked by the Land Division Administrator to request an amendment to this submittal to add a requirement for a second removal bond that would come into effect when there's approximately 10 years left to this 25-year easement that's being requested. So in other words, we're asking to write in as a condition of the easement that when there is 10 years left on the 25-year easement terms, that would be in approximately 2040, that we would ask the applicant to submit require the applicant to submit a second removal bond to be calculated at that time to ensure the state against the cost of potentially removing the encroachment should at the time that the current easement expires, if that easement or another disposition is not approved by the board, or if the board or OCCL decides that the encroachment needs to be removed at that time.
So I just want to clarify. So
correct,
Rebecca, the one, this is an encroachment now
yes,
because of shoreline erosion. At the time it was built on their land.
That's correct.
So,
Chair.
yeah, so this is, it's not a situation where they're building, where we're giving them, where they're building on our land. We're just, it's a non-conforming use because it was originally built on their land and then subject to erosion. Now it's on state land.
Yes, Chair, that is correct. And at the time that this structure was built, that was in 1995, the entirety of the structure was on, and all portions of the structure were located Malka of the private property boundary. And the structure was constructed legitimately pursuant to permits, to a special management area permit and a shoreline setback variance permit from the county of Maui.
At that time, they didn't need any state permits.
That's correct. It was wholly on private land at that time. And because of Malcolm migration of the shoreline, it's unfortunately now situated on state shoreline land.
So I would assume that under Act 16, if they came in now for a permit to build a new, it would not have been, we would not grant that.
That is correct. We would not allow this kind of new structure to be built.
I'm a little confused about the two bonds. So if you can explain that.
Yeah, so this is, I received this request this morning from the Land Division Administrator that the current removal bond that's requested in the submittal, which is a standard condition of all of these shoreline easements, is the removal bond is in place upon execution of the initial right of entry permit. So the initial interim disposition based on board approval. And we take that bond amount, it's calculated based on an estimate of what it would actually cost to remove the encroaching structures. Our engineering division gives us a calculation of a formula that is made to develop this removal bond amount. We would take this, we would require that the applicant submit this removal bond to us before the initial right of entry permit is executed. It would be held by the state until the final easement disposition is executed. So that's after the legislator's approval, after governor's approval, after the attorney general's office says that all the paperwork's in order and the final easement document is signed, sealed, and delivered, then we would return this removal bond. What we're asking for this the second removal bond, excuse me, would be, I'm informed that this is similar to a standard condition of other types of leases, other types of ground leases, where when we're getting toward the end of the easement term, in this case, I've been asked to say that at 10 years before the easement expires, that we would collect a second removal bond amount to ensure the state against the cost of having to remove the encroachment if at that time the easement disposition is not renewed, if conditions on the ground have changed such that the removal is going to be required. This would ensure that the state's not on the hook for those costs at that time.
Is there a reason why we just don't keep the same removal bond in place?
I don't know.
Okay.
I am not informed.
Ian, are you here to answer that question? Okay.
This, maybe, sorry, this Ian Hero Calaban, give you some
Oh, be
background.
careful, be careful.
No, this is I think this is coming up because, if you recall and, give you maybe a little broader perspective is that, and when we've been bringing you the lease extensions and the, new leases,
Yes.
we've integrated that condition. I think base was, Member Smith, at some point that the board has the right to require the removal bond in the future for the removal of improvements. And I think we're just trying to integrate it into the shoreline easements as well. I think, we could just look at a bond that lasts the whole time
Yeah,
too, that's fine. But I think, because the submittal was written initially to,
I see.
relieve the bond requirement. But later on, we would require, as we get closer to the end of the term with 10 years, but it was mirrored, so we're kind of getting consistency amongst all
Terrestrial kinds of
leases.
I see, I see. Now, if a situation arose where the seawall, let's say a catastrophic event, there's a tidal wave or something, and more than 50% of the wall gets destroyed, then we would have the authority to determine whether they're able to rebuild that or not, right?
Under the rule currently, the 50% of cost is the threshold for whether repair is
You're
allowable.
Right.
But I believe, yes, it would be the board's discretion to, would it be repaired in some way? Would it be removed fully? I believe that would be in the board's discretion to decide.
Because now that it's on state land, when it was previously on their land, if something happened, that would be up to them, but we may not. So they understand we may not grant the ability to rebuild that.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct, Chair. And that is, again, that's the administrative rule that's applicable to all of these shoreline structures. I can say that I did conduct a site visit to this location, and I'm not a structural engineer, but the structure does seem to be sound at this point. I don't believe it's in any imminent danger of collapse.
Can you speak to what the 2021 shoreline application that was rejected was for? What's precipitating all this?
Yeah, so that 2021 shoreline application, this would have been before I was a member of the department, so it wasn't something I was directly involved with. But it was rejected because this administrative rule cited, Administrative Rule 13-222-19 states that a shoreline cannot be certified while there is an unresolved encroachment present on the state land in the shoreline area. So we don't accept those applications. We reject them outright, return the application fee, and ask the applicant, hey, come back to us, let's get a plan to resolve, and then we'll move forward with certification.
Right, so that's why we're here, but do you, I mean, generally shoreline certification, I think of like maybe there's construction that they're planning, or do we know what the trigger is for them?
No, I don't know what the trigger is for them. I did, I did do some research into the permit history of the structure and of the property. Because it's a shoreline property, basically anything that, even minor repairs to, and this is a condominium building with multiple condominium units in it. So basically anything, any kind of repair that needs a permit is going to need a shoreline certification. That could be something as major as replacing the roof or sewer lines, or it could be something as minor as, maybe replacing some interior walls. So I don't know, but there didn't seem to be any sort of major pending renovation. There didn't seem to be any permit applications in for anything like that.
Okay, I'm just asking because, we've had a recent item that was somewhat similar. And I just, if we're talking about even, 15 years in the future, is the condominium owners, are they aware that that's the timeline? I just would hate for it to be a situation where we're talking about, I think, a set period of time, and then they're making repairs or upgrades with the intention of those lasting well beyond the timeline that we might be permitted
Yeah,
for?
that's a good question, Member Barnes. And yes, the association is aware. I've been working with some representatives of the Owners Association, and they are aware that this will have a 25-year term. They're aware that that is the maximum term that this board is going to offer, and that it's our policy not to offer or request anything any longer than that. And they are aware that at the end of that, the expiration of that term, this structure will once again be illegitimate, basically, illegitimately present within the shoreline.
Okay. Riley?
I just had a question. So, I'm all in favor of removal bonds to make sure
Yes.
that improvements that are permanent are maintained. In this situation, if the wall deteriorates, they may not have the ability to fix it, right?
That's true, and that's true of any kind of a shoreline structure or any kind of structure within the conservation district. That if it's destroyed to a certain extent, and we've seen in some other cases some seawalls that, a catastrophic wave or a storm event or something knocked them out, and they have no choice but to remove it at this point.
But even normal wear and tear, this is in what, Kaanapali or something, so
It's in
that's
Kaanapali,
more
correct?
the west or not North Shore, right? But I mean, just normal wear and
Mhm.
tear might require some maintenance, but if we don't allow them to maintain it,
Well, they are allowed to maintain. They can
They are.
yes, they can. And they're actually obliged under the easement disposition to keep it in good repair. For example, if say rocks started falling off and creating a safety
They can go and
hazard,
fix it.
they can't do that, right? So they have an obligation to perform, to maintain it in good condition.
Right.
And we have seen in some cases shoreline property owners who did not do routine maintenance on these structures. They fail, and too bad, so sad. You had your chance.
Yeah.
You should have been maintaining this whole time and you didn't. So,
that's fair.
yeah.
And the other question I had is, when you do these kind of terms where you need to do something in so many years, who keeps track of that?
That would be Land Division would keep track of that. We have, for example, we have a current requirement that these, that holders of these shoreline easement dispositions maintain liability insurance for the life of the easement. That's something that's tracked.
Okay.
And it's something that, if they fall out of compliance with, we go after them
Goes
for
on
that.
that checklist so that,
Correct.
okay,
Yes.
I'm good, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I have a question. So, I have a couple questions. So there's a footnote over here on page 4
Yes,
on reference to a survey.
yes.
Is that survey, who pays for that? The applicant?
The applicant paid for that survey.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's that. And so today we're here to approve 3 items, right? And they're different items, the non-exclusive easement, the immediate right of entry, and the revocable permit.
Correct.
Okay. And then now we're talking about the removal bond. And so somewhere we're gonna have to include language into the recommendation.
Yes, that's correct. That would be under recommendation number 6. And we
Oh,
would add
okay.
that in as a new item with a lowercase letter, or sorry, capital letter. So right now, as things stand currently in this submittal, the applicant's required to submit an initial removal bond, which will stand in effect during the term of the right of entry permit and during the term of the revocable permit. It will be refunded to the applicant at the time of execution of the easement disposition. The second removal bond we're asking for, we would again add that in as a capital letter list item under item number recommendation number 6. That would say that when the easement disposition, a condition of the easement disposition is that when there's 10 years left to go on the easement, they will submit a new removal bond, which will be held until the end of the easement term.
Okay. Okay, I just want to be sure that it's
Or held
it's in here. Yeah.
Yes, correct. That would be number 6, and it would be held past the easement term,
Okay.
actually, so we can make sure if we needed to take that out, the state is not on the hook for the cost. And
Thank
I've
you.
just been passed a note. Oh, yeah, so, that we would, the language would be something very similar to, item 6, 6G. post a removal bond to remove the encroaching seawall steps and revetment covering the last 10-year period of the 25-year easement.
So you're adding that to the recommendation?
That's correct, yes.
6G.
So that would be on about page 8 of the current submittal.
Right.
And to clarify, 4B and 5B, the reference to removal bond in the ROE and the RP, that's the same removal bond?
That's correct. Yes, one removal bond is required before we execute the initial ROE. We hold that same removal bond through the period of the ROE and the RP.
Let me ask you this question.
Yes.
This is subject to legislative concurrence and go, what happens if the legislature doesn't concur?
That's a really great question. I've actually I've worked on this from both the DLNR side and from the legislative side. I used to work for the legislature, and I handled these types of submittals then. The policy seems to be, there's not anything specified, in so many words in statute, but the policy seems to have been and been accepted on all sides that as long as the legislature, this is a funny way to put it, but doesn't give an affirmative thumbs down to the easement, so it doesn't hold a vote and says, no, we do not approve this easement. So if it's not approved because of it wasn't heard, it wasn't scheduled, it was never taken up by a committee or by the full chamber floor, and so just doesn't get passed, that we resubmit and we take another bite at the apple. And
How many bites at the apple do you take?
I have seen, to be quite honest, and Ian's going to be real mad at me for saying this.
No.
I've seen multiple bites at the apple. I've seen submittals come in for board approvals or board actions that were approved 10, 15 years prior. And for some reason, either something fell through the cracks and didn't get submitted to the ledge, or the ledge didn't complete a vote on the measure in a particular session, that it's just been coming back until we get approval.
Like, why do it? So,
Well, I would just
add?
clarify for the board too, and I think that's why given what Rebecca is saying, that why we have the RP and the initial removal bond in place. So, there is a
Right.
disposition, right, and they're paying rent.
Yeah.
And they have the insurance and then the removal bond as an interim step, in the sense that there is something that, there's a procedural error or whatever, and the legislature didn't approve it. There's something in place until we can work on that, which may take more than one session sometimes.
What if the legislature, they don't approve it? And then do we require them to remove it?
Yes.
Probably have to come back to you folks and.
So shouldn't we wait for the legislative approval? Because it says with prior legislative approval. So shouldn't the land board wait until you get legislative approval before you come to the board?
It is a bit of a chicken and egg question, Chair. And I can say from the legislative side, the requirements for the concurrent resolution that's presented to the legislature for approval, those requirements, we need to, the concurrent resolution needs to include the board action, the date of the board action, the documentation that the board has already approved this, and now the legislature is doing their second part here. Just from a legislative history standpoint, legislative approval was not always a condition of these easements, and it was added on later. And the process, the board approval process was already in place at that time. So I believe that's from, like I said, from a legislative history standpoint, that's probably why we do the board action first and the legislative action second.
Now that there is legislation, this is prior approval of the ledge, shouldn't the applicant get legislative approval first and then it comes to the board?
That would be a policy question, and a policy direction that could be taken. I think that for reasons of efficiency, getting the board approval first makes a lot of sense, because then the legislature knows exactly what they're approving of. The board has already said, these are the parameters, this is the thing, and so the legislature knows exactly what it's voting to approve.
If we approve it, does it then resolve the encroachment? And then they can go get a shoreline certification?
Yes.
Which means, and we don't know what they plan on building. I mean, maybe we haven't seen any plans, but what if they're proposing to build an underground parking garage?
Well, that would be something that would be subject to, in this case, county approval.
yeah.
And
But
they
the
would have to go
shoreline
through.
Certification is
Is a
prerequisite.
precondition,
It's a
correct.
So, and the only way, so it's, I mean, I'm not too sure if we're putting the cart before the horse here.
Again, I do believe it's a chicken egg question. And it's I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, finish it, and I'll add to that.
And I believe that it's a policy decision that it's at a level higher than mine to make as to which goes first. But I know that traditionally and from a legislative history standpoint, this is why we're doing it. And again, I don't think just from a former legislative staffer position, the legislature's not going to hold a vote on something that they don't know what they're voting on.
And to add to that, I've been like told, there were instances where the board, didn't approve, and we were told, I mean, they're no longer the same chairs, but by like the Senate and House waterline chairs, that the committees rely on the board's, decision-making and judgment, and they don't want to be the first. I mean, that's frankly what it is. They don't want to be the first one in line. They would rather, rely on the board, hearing this in a public meeting and making a decision and relying on that for their consideration. So, take for what it's worth, that's been expressed to me personally by the former waterline chairs, that they want the board to decide this before coming to the ledge.
I just worry about the reliance. They go get a shoreline certificate. They're then able to get a shoreline certification. They rely upon, and we say it's all at your own risk because you still need legislative disapproval.
Right.
But they go and build something. They go to the county. They said, I got a shoreline certification, and they build something. And then we tell them, then the legislature, 1-2 sessions later say, we're not going to approve this because there's community sentiment opposing this. And now we're going to tell them they got to remove it.
Yeah, it is. It is a question. It definitely is a question. Again, really, I say this a lot. It sounds flip, but it's truly not. Real estate is an inherently speculative investment, right? Coastal real estate doubly so, because you're dealing with a regulatory environment and you're dealing with a natural environment. If a person under our capitalist system, if a person wants to do something with their own property, as long as they work within the regulations, they have the right to do that, and they assume the risk of doing that as well.
But is the applicant even here today?
I believe not, no.
If it was important to them, I would have expected them to be here.
I don't know
It was a
why.
little presumptuous, perhaps.
The applicant is not here today.
Okay. Okay.
Is this short-term rental or the nature of the?
It's a condominium. I don't know whether this is it's not a hotel. It is a condominium. I don't know what percentage of owners are full-time residents, and I don't know whether the units are, excuse me, primarily individual residents or used as vacation rentals. I don't know.
And will you just repeat, it's 25-year, but it would be up in 2040 is what you said?
That the bond would be, if we do the second
got it,
removal bond,
okay.
the removal bond would, it would be around 2040 when we would ask them for that removal
Okay,
bond.
but it would be 25 years from 2025, so
Correct.
2050. Okay.
Okay. I don't see any other members of the public here.
Hi, Kaivi's still here.
You're a board member, you're not a member.
Hi, Rebecca. Kaivi's still here. Okay, so Rebecca, in the submittal in 1993, there was a
95.
concrete block seawall. Then in
That's correct.
1995, they replaced the concrete block with coarse rubble masonry wall, right?
Yes.
What happened? What transpired from 1993 to 1995, 2 years, that necessitated the removal of the concrete block wall to a coarse rubble masonry wall?
Yeah, that's a good question. The concrete block wall failed.
It failed.
It did.
Okay, so
It failed,
okay,
and then
so-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The concrete block wall failed, and then the current structure, which is a revetment with a head wall behind it and some side revetments, that was built behind the Malca of the certified shoreline, fully on the private property.
Okay, so in that concrete wall, block wall that failed certified the shoreline in 1993, right?
That's correct.
And then it failed, and then, right, the coarse rubble masonry. Do you know why it failed?
I don't, I've seen photographs and I've seen, and I've seen the county permit application to build the currently existing wall. And from information that I've gotten from there, it looked like it was, age, environmental conditions, and the shoreline is migrating malca in this, in this area. And at the time, since the we'll call it the 1993 wall was fixing the shoreline, the waves were hitting it directly. So again, I think it was a combination of material failure due to age and environmental conditions. Is what
Okay,
it
thank you.
seems.
And then, and based on your understanding of armoring the shoreline, would you say that this would fall under armoring the shoreline?
This is a, I believe that this would be, this would count as something that would be an armoring structure for purposes of the current statute, which prohibits constructing new structures like this. Yes, this is a shoreline hardening structure. And
Okay,
this,
thank you,
and the
Rebecca.
current
Okay,
CRM wall now fixes the shoreline currently.
got it. Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, do you have a motion?
Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the submittal as it was submitted, to also add the language for 6G as in George, that's really sitting in Ian's iPhone. If you could read that.
Okay.
For the purpose of the minutes,
Yeah,
please,
no,
Ian.
no problem. Let me find it.
Sorry.
Sorry. Sometimes the message goes away if I. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I'll read it again. 6G, post a removal bond to remove the encroaching seawall, steps, and revetment covering the last 10-year period of the 25-year term easement.
Okay, and with that, yes, I'd like to move that we approve.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay. I'm gonna call for them. I'm gonna call for a roll call vote. Okay. Eva Lenny, sorry, can you do a roll call vote?
Chair Chang,
No.
Member Char,
Aye.
Member Kato,
Aye.
Member Barnes,
No.
Member Yoon,
No.
Member Ono,
Aye.
Member Smith.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes with 4 votes. Okay, and I think that is the close of our business. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.